So today I thought I would share some budget friendly tips on how to save money whilst owning mice. Of course that doesn't mean that mice are cheap or inexpensive pets. There's always going to be a cost involved with them, but things like buying their initial setup and their cage setup and everything involved with it, that can be anywhere from a couple of £100s or dollars. And of course there's always going to be vet bills. Vet bills are just something that you can't skimp out on and you can't avoid. They are going to pop up from time to time, but otherwise when it comes to other aspects of their care, there are certain things you can do to save a bit of money. So my first tip for you is regarding their bedding. My biggest tip with this is try to avoid buying bedding from pet stores, mostly chain pet stores, because they're going to be a bag about this big, very overpriced. You don't get much for your money. Instead, I recommend going to a farm store that sells bedding for chickens or horses. Of course, they need a lot more bedding and it tends to be a lot cheaper and you get a lot more for your money. So this is the bedding that I use with my mice and also with my rats, and this was a 20kg bag of bedding. There is not much left of this at the moment, but this only cost me £12 from a local horse store. I can also get this on Amazon. Obviously it's a bit more expensive, but for the convenience of not having to drive around and look for it, it's not too bad, especially compared to commercial beddings, things like Carefresh. You wouldn't get as much of that for your money. So this is the bedding that I use, and I just go to local farm stores, things like chickens and horses. People use this bedding with them and it's perfectly safe and good to use with mice and rats too. So with this, I make sure to put a decent amount of this in their enclosure, and the more you put in, the more absorbent it's going to be, the less often you have to change it, the less often you have to buy more. And I tend to only do a replacement of this about once a month just because of the size and how much I put in, and that tends to work out about a third of the bag or half of the bag sometimes, and that's about £4 to £6 a month just on the mouse bedding. So a lot cheaper than buying big bags of Carefresh or big bags of Katie Clean and Cozy or smaller bags of shaving type beddings at pet stores. That I guess would be a side tip. Try to use the most absorbent bedding possible. Shaving type beddings, things like hemp and aspen, tend to be very absorbent, and it's going to save you money in the long run by not constantly having to change that on a weekly basis if it's getting stinky and not absorbing all of that pee. Another tip regarding their bedding that could save you money is going bioactive. Of course you will have to do your research on how to do this and how to do this properly, but there is some good groups out there, I'll put them in the description, that can help you in your research of how to do this. And in theory, if you get this right, you won't have to have the added cost of buying bedding on a monthly basis. Of course there is the initial cost of buying all of the soil and the cleanup crew and everything else you have to add in to make it bioactive, but once you've got it, and you're constantly reusing that soil all the time and not having to buy more on a monthly basis. Of course sometimes you might have to buy more soil just to top it up or more cleanup crew just to top that up, but generally you're eliminating that monthly cost of buying bedding or substrate, and it's quite a budget friendly and also eco-friendly way to avoid that whole side of things and reduce your costs on a monthly basis. Another way you can save money with your mice is by growing their own food, things like vegetables, sprays, herbs, all things you can grow at home in pots. And Victoria Rachel did a really cute video recently showing her indoor garden and growing things for her hamsters and her rabbits, and it's a really fun way to get involved with your pet's food that doesn't really cost too much. One very inexpensive way you can give your mice things to climb on inside their enclosure is by using mouse leaf branches from trees. This one is pretty much free. Just don't go into someone's garden and start chopping down their trees without permission. You can go outside and collect branches from mouse safe trees. Just of course make sure they are safe wood, things like apple trees, most fruit trees, ash trees, birch trees. I'll leave a list of safe mouse woods in the description, and you can go out and collect these, obviously dry them out, clean them, and then they can climb on them in their enclosure. My next tip is to look in places you wouldn't really expect to find things for mice or small pets, and this is my favourite thing to do. I am constantly on the lookout for a good bargain, and this I've had for years. This is so cute. It's a little house, but it's supposed to be a candle holder and it has an entrance on the back. This was only £1 from Poundland. If you was to buy this in somewhere like Pets at Home, easily this would be like £6 just because it's targeted at hamsters or mice. This was only £1, so look in places like Poundland or the dollar store if you have that, if that's your equivalent. Look in places like that for a good bargain, either in the outdoor section or like the candle holder section. You can get really, really cute hides, pretty much not much money at all. My next tip, if you are on a bit of a budget and you're struggling to fill out their enclosure, just reuse things like cardboard boxes or tubes or things from deliveries. Your mice are not going to know the difference or care the difference between a cardboard box like this and a pre-made hide like this. They're not going to know the difference. Cut some holes into this, fill it with some really fun bedding. Your mice will appreciate a cardboard box just as much, sometimes even more, because they really do enjoy chewing these. And when they do get too disgusting, you can just throw them out at no cost to you if you've had a delivery with a box anyway. Use things like this if you're struggling to fill out the enclosure and it's looking a bit gappy. Mice will appreciate a good cardboard box just as much as they'll appreciate a hide that is sold and made for mice. So if you are struggling, things like that, things like this, are just made mostly for our aesthetic, to look cute, to have a cute mouse in a wooden house, but things like this, just as good. My next tip to save some cash is not something that I have ever tried personally, but I've seen a lot of other people doing this, and that is using a dehydrator to make your own treats. With this, obviously there is the initial cost of buying the dehydrator up front, unless of course you've already got one sat in the cupboard somewhere, but you could find one secondhand on selling sites. That is going to be an initial cost though, but over time it might save you a bit of money by making the treats yourself, and it can be a much more healthier alternative to some store-bought treats that you don't always know what's in them. With this, it's literally just a piece of carrot you've dried out, not put anything extra on this, and it can be a lot healthier and also possibly save you some money too. Another way to save a bit of money is by making your own wooden toys or items or platforms. Of course, this does require some level of skill and expertise to know how to cut things and saw things and drill things, and obviously having the tools to do this. Or if you know someone that does know how to do this, just asking them nicely if they'll do it for free or for the cost of the materials, but this can save you a fair bit of money. I don't have one to show you right now. Not sure if you can see that platform behind me, but that is pretty much just a flat piece of wood and then some wooden dowel legs drilled in. This, if you were to buy this from somewhere like Getsu, I think it is, that can easily be about £30 for a small platform, and that can be quite expensive if you need multiple of them in the enclosure. So if you can figure out how to make these yourself, that can save a fair bit of money too. On the subject of making things, you can also make them their own hammocks to save money. If you have a sewing machine, you can use that. I think there's also some no-sew hammock tutorials out there if you don't have a sewing machine, where you just like tie pieces of fleece together. That's an option. And you can also make your own ropes in the enclosure. I don't think I have the ones that I made as an example. If I do, I'll put a picture on screen, but these are fairly simple. All you do is cut pieces of fleece into strips and then braid these, tie them, and then clip them to the top of the enclosure. This cost me a couple of pounds at most, and that's a really cheap alternative to buying pet store or store-bought ropes that can be quite pricey. Now my last couple of tips are to do with the enclosure itself. For a decent sized enclosure, this is often the biggest upfront cost, but it doesn't always have to be. There's ways around this to reduce that cost, and the first one is to buy your cage secondhand. Places like Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Gumtree, all good places to look for some of the more popular appropriate size cages. Obviously amongst all of the terrible tiny hamster cages on there, but sometimes you can find a really good bargain. Things like the Alaska cage or some of the bigger Savick cages. They can be anywhere from £80 to £100 new, and you can often find them on there for about £30 to £50, which is a good bargain for a good cage that's in an okay condition, and that can save you a fair bit of money too. The other way to get a cheaper enclosure is to make one yourself. DIY enclosures are a really good way to get more space for your money. This one I have is the IKEA Linmon, and I think it cost me about £40, maybe max £50 with all of the materials to actually make this. And if you were to buy a tank of this size or get someone to custom make this, easily it would cost over £100. So that's a really good way to save money, is to make one yourself. Obviously this does require some basic tools and ability to do this, and if you don't have the ability or space to make one, sometimes you can get lucky and find really good custom enclosures secondhand, again, on selling sites, things like Facebook Marketplace. I know a couple of people that have IKEA linen ones and they've actually found them on Facebook secondhand in okay condition, so you can find custom cages sometimes that people just don't want. Obviously make sure it's not like falling apart and things and it is actually suitable, but sometimes you can get lucky if you don't want to or can't make your own. You can find them secondhand too. But that is it for today's video. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching and hope it's been helpful in helping you save some money in certain areas when it comes to caring for your mice. Don't forget to subscribe and we'll see you in our next video, won't we? Bye guys.